this last series before we head into the summer, we have been talking about trying to have a mind shift. And the fundamental mind shift that I'm thinking about when we have this conversation is shifting the popular narrative of, in American Christianity really, of heaven being out there one day as something that we want to qualify for, whether through grace or works, depending on how it is you understand that. I would understand that through grace, something that you can't earn, but that God grants you through his salvation. But instead to see heaven as something that has an idea of both that which is not yet, that's which we long for. Things have not been made right. God has not saved all things. God has not brought his saints home with him. Something that is not yet, but something that is also already, because the New Testament uses present tense and future tense when it is talking about things like heaven or the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, depending on which writer is talking about it. There is a sense of already and not yet. We are invited to anticipate God's fullness, but also called to live as if the kingdom has begun in Jesus Christ. And so we've been working through lots of different authors and places in the New Testament, in the Gospels, in the epistles, all sorts of places to show this tension of already and not yet. And today I want to read what I think is a fairly familiar scripture, but one that maybe isn't delved into to really think about what's happening, because it's flowery language. And when we get flowery language in the Bible, we get real excited and we get memory happy. But sometimes we don't really dig in to really parse through and think about what might be being said there. And so we're going to look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. Just a short little text. I'm going to invite you, if you would, to join me in standing as we read the word of the Lord today. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. This is what it says. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into this wonderful light. Once you were not his people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Notice the tension of past, present, and future here. You have been called. You have been saved. Live now as a royal priesthood in a holy nation and glorify God on the day he will visit us. There is past, present, and future happening in here. The choices of words are compelling too, especially if you could take a moment and situate yourself in the ancient world in which this was written. Rome was massive and dominant. It expanded well outside of the city into provinces of what we would consider 3 different continents today. It was expansive, and it was a nation, a people. And here we are called to live as foreigners and exiles in Rome, representing a holy nation that God is making out of us. These people that Peter are writing to had very little in common. To call them a holy nation truly misunderstands what that word means in any kind of human terms. Nations do not exist spread apart from one another. Nations are people united by proximity. You don't even have to believe the same things. You just pretty much have to live in the same place to be a nation. But here, God is saying, or Peter is saying, he's inviting us, that God is bringing us together from all over the world to be one nation, not united by proximity, not united by where we live, not united by governors or laws, but united by the grace of God who has called and made us to be a people. And our call from there is to live as foreigners and exiles, not taking part in the world as it is, but seeing ourselves as a royal priesthood in the midst of this very, very unusual setup. Martin Luther was German. He's from the 15th century. And he began the Protestant Reformation, and he wrote that he believed that there was a priesthood of all believers. And that there are those who believe that this text was some of what gave him that language. He was, of course, scolding the practices of the Catholic Church in the day, where the priests were some separated class of people who represented truly the glory of God, but yet became distant from the people. People would almost come to see glory rather than recognize God's glory could live and dwell within them. Priests all the way back to Aaron, the brother of Moses, being declared a priest in the Old Testament, were a people who were indeed separated from the profaneness and sinness and fallenness of this world, called to represent the glory of God in this world. This is what Aaron was told his role was to be, to recognize the glory of God and then to represent the glory of God in the world. So when people saw Aaron, they didn't see God in that Aaron was God. No one believed Aaron was God. But when they saw Aaron, they were reminded that God's glory was among them. God's presence was among them. And so here, Peter is saying, separated though you are, fallen though this world is, one day Jesus will return and you, God's saved, chosen people, are to be a representation in the midst of this fallen world of God's glory. That something else is coming. That the toil and struggle of this life will end one day when Jesus makes his glorious appearing. And when we come to know Jesus, our life changes. We are no longer a slave to the systems and the ways of this world. Instead, we submit and give ourselves to the way things will one day be. We have seen a future that is not in line with the struggle of this life, and it changes who we are and what we long for in this world today. We are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a representation of God's vision for the way things ought to be. Now, many of you know that last week I wasn't here. I was instead in Germany meeting a church there and getting to know them. I'm doing that because I'm beginning this process through the next few months of trying to imagine, envision, and see what it is that God wants us as a church to be. And so I want to see what people are doing and how they're functioning as the church in the world today. I want to be able to see beyond just my imagination and see what God is doing in the world. And I want to share a little bit about what it is that I learned. I went to this place called Kircha in Action. I think, I don't know, I'm not really good at German, but it means church in action. I can tell you the English translation. And basically their vision for their church is that they want to see heaven break into earth based on the way we pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That is a radical prayer if you really think about it. God, make heaven come to earth. Make it break in. Make us experience Heaven here, now, not just when we get there later on, but may heaven be on earth. And their vision is they want to see heaven come to earth in our lives, our community, and our world. And in Germany, this makes some sense based on the history of the church there. Now, first of all, it's important that you understand most everything that you believe about Christianity comes from Germany. It's true. Now, obviously, Jesus didn't come from Germany, but the Protestant Reformation, which we are a part of the Protestant church, happened in Germany. Most every scholarship that shifted from Catholicism to Protestantism has come from Germany over the last 500 years. But today, only about 1% of people in Germany go to church on a Sunday morning. That country has shifted from the epicenter of Protestantism to a place where 1% attend church. And that becomes what's compelling about meeting these people, because they're longing to see heaven come to earth in a place where people are generally disinterested in faith. And there are many sociologists who project that the United States of America is 20 years behind European culture. And we can see that there has been a decline in church attendance since the 1990s, and that the most significant drop in church attendance has happened since 2020. The last 2 years has shown a stark drop in church attendance. Most people who study this stuff don't believe that it's just simply because of COVID, but that COVID gave people an excuse to become who they were already leaning towards being. That there was a disengagement from church already, and this made it convenient. Church attendance is at an unbelievably low percentage in the U.S. as well. And even when you dig into church attendance, church involvement and Christian action doesn't always pair perfectly with attendance. Now, in Germany, they had ways to talk about heaven on earth for literally millennia now. It was the church. I brought some pictures of the way that the church looks still today in Germany, because, can you show me the next slide? There we go. The churches there are huge. Like, you might have seen like a mega church before. You might have gone by like Willow Creek or Elevation or something and be like, wow, that's a big church. It is totally different in Europe. For those of you who have traveled there, you understand. The idea in the Middle Ages and before was to build a building that was bigger than everything else in the city. And so the church would be these massive, massive cathedrals that towered over the town. They were built specifically to orient themselves east and west. And they were done so on purpose because the sun rises in the east. And the churches would purchase glass, which was incredibly expensive. And they would line the east and the west parts of the buildings so that when the sun came up, the room, the cathedral, would be filled with light. And then as the day finished and the sun dropped, it would slowly melt away. The purpose of this was to be heaven on earth for the people who were toiling in the midst of plague and pain and hard labor and poverty would go to the church, and they would be filled with a moment of heaven by seeing beauty beyond where they could possibly find anywhere else. The church was heaven on earth, and the people were so deeply caught in struggle that they would go in order to experience moments of beauty such as this. This is Germany in the Middle Ages. Now, you have studied Germany in our era. And you know that there are some real difficult moments in their history. Particularly, there is a pessimism among German people that does not match the optimism of Americans. And it's very important to catch these two differences. Americans are seen throughout the world as optimists. We believe we can accomplish anything. Germany, however, lost 2 straight world wars that they picked. They picked the fight, they lost. There's been a pessimism amongst them since then. And so among the things they've tried to do since those moments is to have a public reckoning and to do actions that are repentance for the sake of not becoming those people ever again. An example is in the city of Frankfurt, where I was, they put placards in the street remembering the terrible actions of the Nazis. And so this is the next picture. Thank you. You see that little gold piece of metal right there? Every person that was dragged away from their home in Frankfurt during the era of the Nazis, whether because they were Jewish or disabled or otherwise, those who were taken and killed, their names have been put into the street where they lived when they were taken. And as you can see, someone from the family has come by to remember this person. This is a person who is disabled. I saw other ones in the street as well, married couples with very Jewish names. You're told in the placard written in German what year they were taken, where they were taken to, and how they were killed. It's a memory on a day-to-day basis walking through of the horrors and atrocities that people are capable of, and also an allowing of a legacy to continue to remember these people who terrible things were done to them. It's a way of having public repentance. Another thing about Germany today is that they have a very, very different social system and setup than we have. They pay more than we have in taxes, and they will tell you, they will scold you, they will point at your face and say, we are not a socialist country. It's very important that we understand that. We are not a socialist country. We are a social country. We are free. We can do whatever we want. We can go wherever we want. We can have whatever career we want. We are free. We can live wherever we want. So they said, socialist is China. You show up in China and say you're starting a factory, they'll ask you how many people you need, and you'll say, I need 5 managers and 52 workers for the factory, and the next day there will be 5 managers and 52 factory workers, and those people had no freedom. They were told what to do. Like, we are free, but we pay more in to make sure that there is a safety net, that people are taken care of. This is what they say. I'm not the evangelist of German culture, I'm just telling you facts. And so what makes this very, very strange and different than America is that homelessness is a choice. It's a choice. Now here, homelessness is often something terrible has happened, something has become undone, right? In Germany, if you are homeless, you can walk down to the government building in your neighborhood, knock on the door and say, I'm tired of being homeless. And they'll say, great, we have a home for you. And they will put you in that home. Simple as that. So people who live as a homeless person have chosen to live as a homeless person because Germany has created a system to try to eliminate homelessness. But yet, where the church's offices are right upstairs from these pictures that you're looking at right now. The reason they chose this place is because those who are homeless, the very, very few, congregate in this place. Because Germany has also made a choice not to endorse drug use, but they're concerned about things like dirty needles and people dying of dirty drugs. And so they do not give away drugs, but they give away clean needles to make sure they're trying to eliminate some of the possible problems that could exist. And so drug addicts and homeless congregate to this part of the city every single day. And they take drugs on the streets because drugs are not a criminal offense. And so there's very, very little drug use in Germany. There's very, very, very little homelessness. But what little bit there is congregated on this block, just one block off the red light district, which I'll talk about in just one moment. And you'll see here there are people laying around on the street. There is trash. It's a very clean city, but seriously, they come through this part of the city 4 times a day, the police do. Break up all the people, clean up all the trash, and then they come back. And then they break them up, clean them up, come back. They don't tell them to go away. They're just cleaning up after the homeless all the time on this one block. And so the church that I went and met, they were in a very, very posh, nice, high-rise building about 1.5 miles from here. Frankfurt's a very, very modern, very cool city. Part of the reason it's modern and part of the reason it's cool is because it was strategic in World War II and the Allied forces leveled 95% of the city. So when 95% of your city is in bomb rubble, you've got to rebuild, and you rebuild modernly, right? And so the EU central bank is there because it used to be in London, and London's not a part of the EU anymore. You may have heard of that. Brexit, yeah? No, maybe it didn't make the news here. I don't know. Just kidding. So they had to move the bank. It's in Frankfurt now. Like the EU central bank is this brand new high-rise in the city. And so this is a very, very clean, very modern city. And so the church decided they didn't want to be in the posh new part of the city. They wanted to be where they thought Jesus would be, and they thought Jesus might be with the drug addicts and the homeless of the city. And they kept saying, like, because of the social structures in Germany, there are no ghettos. And it's true, there's no ghettos. There are definitely poor people and rich people. There are definitely people who have too much and people who have too little. But there's no, like, ghetto. Everyone has something because of the social structure, which then creates different societal problems. And this is what's really fascinating talking to Germans. They're like I imagine if you have like a more conservative political bent, you're probably thinking this is craziness. Why would anyone do that? And the Germans would say, yeah, all those criticisms are right. They all exist, no doubt about it. But there are also benefits. And among those benefits is, generally speaking, you have to try, you have to want to some degree, to get to this level. And then this struggle is then just one block of the city. And so the church decided they were going to move to that place of struggle. And so they put their offices right upstairs. Every time they go to lunch or go home, they walk down and there are people with crack pipes and brand new needles shooting heroin into their arm. This is where they chose to be because this is where they saw the greatest need and the greatest struggle in the city was. And they wanted to bring heaven on earth to people's lives. And who could use it more than people who have chosen homelessness in a society that makes homelessness unnecessary? They wanted to be there right in the midst of that struggle. And so over and over and over, they choose the people who are struggling in their society. Their argument is that churches today and all of their clean, sanitized life, they're all battling and fighting to grow over the same pot of people. They said there's 15% of people in Germany who have positive connection to the church. They may go on Christmas and Easter. They may remember going when their grandmother brought them as a child. 15%, they said every church we know of is trying to fight to get that 15% to come to their church so that they can have more and more people. And they said, well, that leaves 85% of people who need Jesus who no one is reaching out to. And so over and over and over, this church in action, is trying to identify and reach out to the people who need Jesus, who no one is trying to work towards. And so they've started working among refugees. The next picture I have here is a picture of a building they built. They've begun leveraging the very particular situation that they're in. Rather than arguing with their government, they have just simply decided to use the government as it is, which is kind of funny. The German government is open to receiving refugees, and so they received 1 million or so Syrians after a Syrian war recently. Ukrainians are moving there by the thousands. And as refugees were coming, the church decided we need to tell them about Jesus. So they bought this building right here. As you can see, it used to be a fitness club, and now it is a refugee house. They purchased it, went to the German government and said, we will house refugees. And the German government immediately signed a 10-year lease with them to pay every cost of having this building. And so now they have people who are coming over trying to get their lives begun there, and they have a Christian environment to put them in, to tell them the story of Jesus and to witness to them. It is a difficult life to be a refugee, no doubt. The next picture is on the inside. You can see it's not glamorous living, but they're trying to create this to be a halfway house to receive people, to help them, and then to move them into society once they get a job and are capable of getting an apartment. It's difficult because it's competitive to get an apartment, but yet they're giving housing to people who are forced to leave their homeland, and they're doing it while testifying to the goodness of Jesus Christ. They go to the different places where refugees are with what they call a spielmobile. This next picture, I think we missed one. Yep, there we go. So they bought a van. They partnered with World Vision to purchase this van. Spiel just means play. I learned that. That's the one German word I learned while I was in Germany, is play. Spiel, which I thought was funny because a spiel here is just like giving a speech that goes on and on and on, right? Kind of persuasive. But like spiel, because when I saw Spielmobile, I was like, that sounds terrible. I'm like, oh, it just means play. Oh, okay, I get it. So this is a basically it's like a VBS on wheels. They go from refugee place to refugee place once a week and put on like a day camp for the kids who are there. They're bringing heaven mobily on earth to kids who don't have toys to play with on their own. The church, the downtown in Frankfurt, I showed you the drug abuse. Right over one block is what is called the red light district there. I have a picture of what it looks like at night. It is a place where there is legalized prostitution. And it is very, very difficult in nature, to say the least. Can you show me the next picture? There we go. So, people come from all over the world, some trafficked, some by choice, trying to make money to send back to their families. Many of the women here have children that they're trying to provide for. If you work in a brothel, it is legal, so that's good news. You're not going to get busted and thrown into jail. You can get a permit with the government to do it so that you then won't get thrown into jail. However, the pimps that own these places do not allow you to live there. And so they charge $150 a night for a bed in a brothel, a bed that you don't get to sleep in and live in. A man who wants time with a prostitute gives $30 for their experience. So just to break even for the night, you have to have 5 men come to you in one night. In order to begin providing for your family, you need to double what you're paying, which basically means 7 to 10 a night in order to provide for your needs, usually for children and elderly parents that they've left behind. But where they come from, where they live, they can't afford any jobs there. So they come to a place where prostitution is legal in order to provide for their kids back home. The church decided they were going to start ministering to the prostitutes. And so they put a place right outside of the train station in Frankfurt on a beautiful street only about 2 blocks away from here. And they call it the DropIn Center. The next picture shows you what it looks like inside. In there they have wardrobes and makeups and feminine products and cleaning products and all sorts of things, hoping to give the women a chance to feel like human beings. They build relationships with them. They listen to their stories. They listen to why they're there. There's nothing on the walls that make it seem like it's overtly a Christian place because they want people to come. They want people to belong before they recognize that they could be saved by Jesus. They listen to their stories. They talk. They share incredibly painful stories about what they've left behind and why they're there. In working with prostitutes, the women who are in the upper left-hand corner there, the 2 standing, they work in this drop-in center, and they work with prostitutes. They're friends with prostitutes. They tell the story about ones that they have gotten out and sent home who have come back. And the stories of why they come back are painful and difficult to listen to. It's never as easy as just quit. There's a lot more happening, both emotionally and economically. But they keep working with these women in order to build relationship with them. And just being a friend to them is something that these women don't have otherwise. Their life is poured out and used and taken from them. But these women exist to be their friends, to share stories and to humanize them. In fact, I wore a bracelet today that was actually made by one of the prostitutes that they gave me and the others that I was there with. They made these in order to find ways to start making money for the women beyond just prostitution. So they sell these. They sell them in order to fund this drop-in center, in order to get them clothes, in order to have a wardrobe for them for whatever they might want to do next. And so the stories are just incredible of what happens when you choose to live amongst pain and hurt, people who are experiencing hell on earth. And instead, you break in just a little bit to tell them about what heaven on earth might look like. The next place I visited wasn't quite as shocking and painful. In fact, this is something that makes a lot of sense to us. It's called Pipeline, but it's an after-school program. The after-school program, they chose, again, there's no ghettos. You can't think Frankfurt like, oh, what's the bad part of town? We're going to go be in the bad part of town. You can't really think like, oh, where are the families that are affected by incarceration and drug abuse and all that kind of stuff? Oh, I'm going to go be there. It doesn't work like that. Most neighborhoods are very similar to other ones. And so what they did was they looked at test scores. What's a neighborhood where students are just struggling and it's hard to put your finger on it? Where are the students who aren't likely to go to college? Although college is free, and so if you want to go and pursue a professional career, it's like going to high school. And so they identified this part of town in Frankfurt where student scores were bad. They don't know why, but they figured that'd be a great place for us to put an after-school place for teens to drop in and have a third space of their own where they could come together and be around Christian adults. So the next pictures are indoors for this place. There's a kitchen in there. The guest book is where you can sign your name when you visit. There's a pool table. All of these places to hang out after school, to be in a positive environment and be there and present for them to help, try to boost test scores and do homework and have a place to look forward to at the end of the day. Now, not everything is done by this church in the midst of poverty. They've also begun this enterprising idea of starting businesses that are self-sustaining in cities around the area. And so they've opened coffee shops, which has been their primary place. They don't have church buildings because church buildings are threatening in Germany. And so they actually do their worship services in coffee shops, in pubs, in breakfast restaurants. They work with the owners, whether they are the ones who are running it or not, to go have multiple services out among the community. And among the stories that they tell is instead of having huddles inside of their church, there's a story of meeting in a pub on a Sunday afternoon where a man walked in crying. He's just pouring tears. And one of the pastors thought, that's pretty weird to see a dude walk into a bar crying. I'm going to go figure out what's wrong. And so he walked over and asked this guy, hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And he said, you would not believe what's happened to me today. He says, well, tell me, I'll listen. He said, I just looked up on Google, good pubs to get a drink, and it sent me to this place. I'm meeting my daughter here to tell her that I'm leaving her mother. And last night, I prayed, God, this is your last chance to tell me you're real. And I showed up at this pub that Google told me to go to, and there are all these Christians singing. I cannot believe it. And so he, in that moment, told him the story of the gospel, reminded him that he was loved in a pub, in a bar in Germany. A couple weeks later, that guy came to a baptism service, and he brought a woman with him. And they were like, oh my gosh, this guy wants to get baptized, but he's already bringing another woman. This is going to be awkward. And he walked up and introduced, this is my wife of 25 years. They reconciled, and they saw a way forward. Stories like this exist when they leave just the typical church model and go to where people are, whether by starting coffee shops or going into pubs. I'm going to skip a few, if you can, to the Rhine-Main area, the map. And so they are located originally in Frankfurt, which is right here in the center. Now, there's a few orange ones here, but if you could just look at the central ones with me. This is what's called the Rhine-Main area. Rhine and Main are two rivers that cross. It's not a very creative name, but it makes sense, right? The Rhine and Main rivers cross. And so they've identified some of the major cities in this area, and they've put a city pastor, which is the old, like, heaven on earth, church facing east and west glass model, where there was a priest who had a parish. They've hired city pastors, not to pastor a church in the city, but to be a missionary to the city. And so Frankfurt is one, Offenbach right next to it is another, Darmstadt is straight south, and then Mainz and Wiesbaden are to the east, or to the west of them, to the west. And each of these 5 cities have a city pastor who understand themselves to be a missionary to the city. They run businesses, they're present in community things, they're trying to meet people who are far from God. And so they've taken a map like this, show me the next slide, and they've put a grid over it. This is their imagination for moving forward. This is where they want to go. They put a grid over their map, and they have decided they want to start a community on mission in each square. Something related to them, whether it's refugee work or going to a senior adult living center or working in an after-school program, whatever it is, they want to start a community on mission where people who are not of the faith or already tied to the faith are in each grid over these cities, and that they can say as a church, we have a presence all over the area that we are called to. They see themselves as planted there by God to that place for the sake, like 1 Peter calls us to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation among pagans. The call of 1 Peter is such that in this moment, as we experience God's glory and forgiveness for ourselves, we live good lives among the pagans. That though they may accuse you of being weird, being out there, not being in step with the way things are, not understanding the culture as it is today, though they may accuse you of those things, that they see your good deeds and they learn to glorify God on the day he visits. Now, what is the outcome of all of this? It's not always easy. It's not just a plan. It's not like, well, you do this and then things happen. But there are glimpses of God's glory amongst them that are incredible. I was invited to a baptism service, which only happens about 3 or 4 times a year. But they baptized 13 people. People from Eastern Europe, from Montenegro, from Iran. Deeply, deeply Muslim people. One of them is a restaurant owner. I went to his restaurant. He went to, can you show me the next picture? You see that lady off to the right. That's Anamona. She is Romanian. She was a refugee herself who is in deep, deep trouble with her family because she found God and gave her life over to Jesus. They are not impressed at all that she is working as a pastor. But she works in Offenbach, and this Iranian dude said, hey, do you know anyone who knows of this Jesus? And she goes, well, I'm a pastor, I do. And he goes, oh man, my nephew keeps asking these questions about Jesus, and I need someone for him to talk to. She said, okay, I'll do it. And so he asked more and more questions and asked, okay, I would like to get baptized. Can I get baptized? And she said, absolutely. And so he decided to become a Christian. And then that same Iranian man who was just up to here, we're trying to find someone to talk to him about Jesus, eventually came to faith himself. And that's the family, last picture, last one. That's the family all in white with her down in the corner. A restaurant owner who just wanted to find someone to talk to their Muslim Iranian son about Jesus. And so the next one is a picture. 13 people were baptized from all over the world because of this work. You can see there's about 150 people there that day. Some of them had no faith at all. Some of them were Muslim friends and family who were just there to be supportive of these people who were losing their faith. And we sang songs to the glory of God, and there was a sermon, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so their vision, again, this is not our vision, this is just their vision. I'm trying to tell you about what they're up to, and I'll wrap it up with this. Their vision is huge. It's to start 1,000 communities on mission. It's to start 200 kingdom projects, which include things like coffee shops, to train and to have and to send into their regional area 200 pastors and missionaries, and to train and to build up 10,000 leaders. You can see that the vision is huge, and you may look at that and say, wow, how are they even going to do that? Well, they don't know, but they know God called them to something big. And I just want to share with you how inspired I am by hearing and seeing all of this. In a place that's post-Christian, in a place that's very postmodern, in a place where it seems like God's heyday is in the past. There are people who are being called of God in the midst of it to enter themselves into the fabric of life, to embed themselves, to see themselves as a royal priesthood in the midst of a world that's questioning God, moving far from God. And they're trying to be creative, imaginative, and most of all, present, fully present in the place that God has put them in this season of their life, that the glory of God, that heaven on earth might be seen and handed and given away through them. It's a much different vision than I'm a member of that church and I go there on Sundays. It's a full devotion of life to being a Christian. It's not just saying I gave my heart to Jesus. It's saying I am called to be a royal priest. I believe Jesus is king, and I represent his kingship wherever I go. That the world may see, though they question God's existence, they may see the glory of God through my presence, through my work, just because I'm there. This is the kind of person that I long to be. I hope it's the kind of person you long to be too. I hope Jesus had made that sort of impact on your life. I don't know exactly what this will look like, but I'm hoping, I'm praying that somehow we can catch a fire that has a missional spirit like this, that we long to go and to show and to see what God might do by us being fully invested and being a royal priesthood in a pagan world. Would you stand with me as we sing a final song?